We've been living once or twice in the Rabbinic paradise. Sorry. So we're going to go through why the Talmud is not kosher. And here's an interesting thing for you. Let's reopen it actually. One of the things these guys did was they decided that these were too dangerous for citizens to own. Yeah. We can't have you possibly protecting yourself from the state, you know? You better not eat that without the rabbi's permission, and he'll get you. It's got to be kosher. So, why the Talmud is not kosher? And even that word actually is not kosher because kashrut, which is where the Hebrew word comes from, is not in the Torah. It's not in the Torah. You don't need the rabbi's permission to eat a lamb killed. Don't, and we'll go through that in future parts. Explaining to the Noachide and the Talmudists why the Torah, the written Torah, is the only foundation. And this idea is in the end of Torah, Kitab, written, Sefer, scrolls or book, or Torah, the written scrolls of the Torah. That's all you need. Talmudists claim that the Gar, or the Goyim, cannot keep the Sabbath, and to do so would be a death sentence. This one could take the longest time to deal with, so I'm going to deal with it first. When Israel left Egypt, who did they leave with? Exodus 12:37-38. And the Bnei Israel journeyed from Ramses to Sukkot, about 600,000 men on foot. Aside from the little ones, a foreign multitude, and this is the important bit, a foreign multitude also went up with them. So there were people who were not naturally born Israelites, along with the flocks and herds, a very large number of livestock. The foreign multitude were not sons and daughters of Israel, but they are included in the congregation or assembly of Israel. And this is why just a few verses later it tells us, Exodus 12:43-44, and Yahweh said to Moshe and Aaron, "This is the statute of the Passover, Pesach. No foreigner shall eat of it, but every man's slave purchased with money, after you have circumcised him, then he may eat of it." So it's setting this a distinction for the foreigner. And this is the only one in Torah, and that's what we're going to go over. That if the foreigner is not circumcised, he cannot keep the Pesach. And there's also something very interesting for the remnant of Huda. Yeah, that is, the Genesis one is definitely a problem for the Masonic globalist model, Charles. So check this out. Father showed me this morning. Exodus 13, the Feast of Unleavened Bread, which is the next Moedim after Pesach. And verse 3, it says, "And Moshe said to the people, remember this day in which you went out from Egypt, from the house of slavery, for by a strong hand Yahweh brought you out of this place, and nothing leavened shall be eaten. This day in the month of Aviv, you are to eat." I lost my place because of my alarm. "You are going out, and it shall be Yahweh when he brings you in the land." This is the important bit here, verse 5. "And it shall be when Yahweh brings you to the land of the Canaanites, the Hittite, the Amorite, the Hivite, and the Jebusite, which he swore to your fathers, you in the land of milk and honey, that you shall do this service in the month." See, they weren't doing Pesach and likely the other feasts in the wilderness. And, Yehuda, when they became exiles from the land, they couldn't properly keep the Moedim. So the rabbinic traditions invented ways they could. So look at when they go in the land, Joshua 5. Now it happened when all the kings of the Amorites who were beyond the Jordan to the west, and all the kings of the Canaanites who were by the sea, heard how Yahweh had dried up the waters of Jordan before the sons of Israel until they had crossed, that their hearts melted, and there was no spirit in them any longer because of the sons of Israel. At that time Yahweh said to Yehoshua, make for yourself a flint knives and circumcise again the sons of Israel a second time. So Yehoshua made himself flint knives and circumcised the sons of Israel at Gibeath Haaluth. Now this is the reason why Yehoshua circumcised them. All the people who came out of Egypt who were males, all the men of war, died in the wilderness along the way. So who was left? The sons of Israel, and the sons of the foreigners. And yes, they were circumcised. This completed the covenant, just as it did in Abraham's time, Genesis 17. And this is my point, Charles. None of us can properly keep the Pesach because you're not in the land. And they circumcised themselves in the land and then performed the Moedim Pesach. A clear exception between the foreigner and Israel. There is only one exemption for the sojourner, the foreigner, or goyim, ger, in regards to guarding Torah or doing Torah. It is right here at the beginning of the journey, and in the next passage is something that is repeated in the three central books of the Torah: Exodus, Leviticus, and Numbers. Exodus 12:48 to 49. But if a sojourner sojourns with you, this is the outsider, and celebrates the Pesach to Yehovah, let all his males be circumcised. That's it. Otherwise you can do everything else, but if you're going to do the Pesach to Yehovah in the land, you must be circumcised. And then let him come near to celebrate it, and he shall be like a native of the land, but no uncircumcised person may eat of it. The same mitzvot, or Torah, shall apply to the native as to the sojourner who sojourns among you. In order to partake of the Pesach offering, you have to be converted to a native of the land. And this is something that goes back to the Abrahamic covenant in Genesis 17. This is my covenant which you shall keep between me and you and your seed, Yisarah, after you. And this is always plural. Every male among you shall be circumcised, and you shall be circumcised in the flesh of your foreskin, and it shall be the sign of the covenant between me and you. And every male among you who is 8 days old shall be circumcised throughout your generations. One who is born in the house, or one who is bought with money from any foreigner who is not of your seed. A servant who is born in your house, who is bought with money, shall be circumcised. Thus shall my covenant be in your flesh for an everlasting covenant. But an uncircumcised male who is not circumcised in the flesh of his foreskin, that person shall be cut off from the people. So if Israel was properly restored, and it's not, and a foreigner wanted to be part of the covenant and did not choose circumcision, then they would be cut off. Or an Israelite, a natural born person. Yeah, that's exactly why they invented the Talmud, to give the rabbis control. It's no different than what Rome did with their religion. Talmudist versus Torah. Number one, forbidden for the foreigner to partake in the Sabbath. And number one answered, it was forbidden only for the uncircumcised foreigner to partake in Pesach, Passover. Number two, the foreigner only responsible to keep the B'nai Noachide Covenant. Number two answered, a foreigner kept all the Torah, and this is evident throughout the wilderness journey, except the Pesach. The narrative doesn't give any other exception for the foreigner except for this feast. Number three, foreigners to be separated from the natural Jew. And it's interesting, they believe Judaism is a religion when the covenant was made with Israel, not one tribe, not Yehuda. And number three answered, the foreigner was to be integrated with Israel except for the issue of circumcision and Pesach. This is the test, by the way, that the New Testament has issues with, speaking against the Torah and the prophets. Like, for example, Ezekiel 44:7. And this is one of the passages that woke me up to, like, there's something wrong in the New Testament. When you brought in foreigners, uncircumcised in heart and uncircumcised in flesh, to be in my sanctuary, to profane it, even my house, when you brought my near my food, the fat and the blood, so they made my covenant void. This in addition to all your abominations, and you have not kept the responsibility of my kadosh things yourselves, but you have set foreigners as keepers of the responsibility given by me for my sanctuary. And thus says the Lord Yahweh, no foreigner uncircumcised in heart and uncircumcised in flesh of all the foreigners who are among the sons of Israel shall enter my sanctuary. So yes, it is interesting what you read from the New Testament in this regard. Number 4, Yah judges foreigners on a different scale than Israel. And number 4 answered, there's a small portion of truth to this. There is. And we're going to get to that in the end of the study for part 1. You are judged based on your present knowledge and your ability to turn from evil and do the good you know. But Yah repeatedly tells us that unequal weights and measures are an abomination. An abomination. Yeah, exactly. We'll get to that, Charles. He says if the animals rested on the Sabbath and servants, but those that weren't Israel can't follow, are animals more important than people? If you had read the Talmud, you would know the answer. Because the Talmud says some things about the foreigners that are worse than what the Quran says about the Jews and Gentiles. Which is also the problem in Roman Christianity, which teaches the same nonsense. He would not be following his own Torah. So this is a summary of what we just went over. The mixed multitude of foreigners were with Israel the entire time they were in the wilderness, and the righteous among them would have entered the promised land. And when they entered in Joshua 5, they would have been circumcised and completed the covenant promise. All right, so was the Sabbath given at Sinai? And this is one of the other arguments. The Sabbath was given at Sinai to only the sons of Israel. The mixed multitude was with them at Sinai. But we'll get to this central issue. Was the Sabbath given at Sinai? This is also the claim that's really interesting that, what the Romans and the Talmudists have in common. It's almost the same religion. Excuse me. The claim of the Roman Christians make as well. The invisible and non-existent wall that is the reason the Sabbath is only for the Yehudim and not the Gentiles, the Goyim. I'm not even going to go deal with Sinai. I don't need to. Let's go back 4 chapters before Sinai. In Exodus 16, starting in verse 4 here. And then Yahweh said to Moshe, behold, I will rain bread from heaven for you, and the people shall go out and gather a day's portion every day, that I may test them, whether or not they shall walk in the way of my Torah. They'll be on the 6th day, they shall prepare what they bring in, and it will be twice as much as they gather daily. Were the foreigners still with Israel? Yeah. This is the only logical conclusion, as later on in Leviticus, which I talked about, Moses again tells us there is one law for the sojourner, one for the natural born, and Sabbath was given as a command before Sinai, even before Noach. Yeah. So let's really think about this, though. Because one of the Talmudists I was debating, he said that the foreigner didn't gather a double portion on the 6th day and went out on the 7th day and found food. And we're going to get into that. That's such a joy. Genesis 2, verse 2 to 3. On the 7th day, God completed his work and he had done, and he rested on the 7th day from all his work which he had done. Then God blessed the 7th day and he sanctified it, because on it he rested from all his work which God had created in making it. See, the Sabbath goes back to creation. It's a sign that you fear the Creator. Just because it's not mentioned, and this is the point of absence of evidence is their only argument, because there is no mention of the Sabbath between Genesis 2 and Exodus 16. But that doesn't mean they weren't keeping the Sabbath for those hundreds of years. It just means it was never written down. And we'll get to examples of this ludicrous argument. It's a logical fallacy. It's again the same one the Romans make, because the Seventh Day Adventists, they see the importance of Sabbath in their heart. They start to keep it, and then the Romans attack them. The Romans say, "Oh, you don't need to do that. You've fallen from grace." The next time it is mentioned in Exodus 16, right? And does the absence of evidence mean that the people did not know the truth? That this is a great time to transition briefly to the misinterpretation of the Noahide Covenant, because there is a Noahide Covenant, and I've heard some say there is no Noahide Covenant in Genesis 9. Well, there is, and the Talmudists are right to say there is, but it doesn't say what they think it says. Putting the cart of commandments before the horse of covenant. Genesis 9:1-7. And God blessed Noah and his sons, and said to them, Be fruitful and multiply, fill the earth. Fear of you and terror of you will be on every beast of the earth, and on every bird of the sky, and with everything that creeps on the ground, and all the fish of the sea. Into your hand they are given. Every moving thing that is alive shall be food for you. And this is one of their arguments. They see Noah ate swine. Roman 2. You look at it. Rome. He ate pig. He had a BLT as soon as he got off the ark. Why aren't pigs extinct then? There were only 2 swine on the ark. If Noah or his sons was like, "Oh, I can't wait to have a BLT sandwich now that we're off the ark," they slaughtered the swine, and there's no more swine because there were only 2 of them. So they were not eating unclean animals. It didn't start till later. However, flesh with its life that is in it, its blood you shall not eat. You surely I will require your lifeblood from every living thing. I will require it. And every man from each man's brother I will require the life of man. Whoever sheds man's blood, by man's blood his blood will be shed. For in the image of God you had made man. And for you be fruitful and multiply, swarm in the earth and multiply it. The text describes a simple written table of mitzvot given to Noah and his sons, directly, not generational. However, and this is important, this is not the Noahide Covenant. It's not. And it's certainly not the Talmudic version, which it has different commands. And it's not the Acts 15 version, which has its own commands. This is just a table of commands he gave Noah that were written down. And it's not complete. Because check this out. Take, for example, something we have written evidence for, adultery. In Genesis 20, and this is, I think, the second time this happens to Abraham. I can't type apparently this morning. So Abraham believed, Abimelech and his people had no fear of God before them. So he lied about Sarah being his wife, fearing they would kill him and make Sarah his wife. So then it happened that Abimelech knew of God, and he knew that he was sinning, because God said in his dream, Indeed, I know that in the integrity of your heart you have done this, and I also held you back from sinning against me. Therefore, I did not let you touch her. Why? Because he would have been committing adultery before it was given at Sinai. And it's not in the Noahide list of commandments. Yet Abimelech knew in his heart that adultery was wrong. Right. In Genesis 26:5, before the Torah is given at Sinai, what does it say? Because Abraham listened to my voice, kept my charge, my commandments, my statutes, and my Torah. He kept the Torah before it was given. How is that possible? So the fact that the Sabbath is not mentioned from Exodus 16 back to Genesis 2 doesn't mean it wasn't there. And the truth about the Noahide Covenant. Now let's get into this. There is a Noahide Covenant, but it's not what the Talmudists claim. Genesis 9:8 to 13. Then God spoke to Noach and to his sons with him, saying, As for me, behold, I will establish my covenant with you and with your Sarah after you. This is every Sarah, all of it, Noach's seed, including Shem, including Abraham, including Isaac, including Jacob, and all of his children. As for, and with every living creature that is with you, the birds, the cattle, and every beast of the earth with you, all that comes out of the ark, even the every beast of the earth. Indeed, I establish my covenant with you, and all flesh shall never again be cut off by the water of the flood, and there shall never again be a flood to destroy the earth. Then Elohim said, This is the sign of the covenant that which I am giving to you, to between me and you, and every living creature that is with you. Shalom, Sammy. For all successive generations, I put my bow in the cloud, and this is important. It is what? The bow in the cloud is the sign of the covenant, shall be for a sign of the covenant between me and the earth, all nations. And this is what the Talmudist gets completely wrong. That Noahide covenant is not just for the outsiders, it's for everyone. The covenant had nothing to do with the commands that were previously given because the covenant is unconditional. That Yah promised to no longer destroy the earth. And this is the Noahide covenant that he promised Noach, his B'nai, and their B'nai, that he will no longer destroy all life regardless of mankind's sin. This covenant has nothing to do with the table of mitzvot that we just read. It has nothing to do with the promise exclusively to the outsiders, the Gentiles. This is why the prophet Isaiah mentions this promise in the afflicted servant song, Isaiah 54:9. For this is like the days of Noach to me, when I swore that the waters of Noach would not overflow the earth again. So I have sworn with you that I will not be furious with you, nor rebuke you. Yahweh declares that based on the Noahide covenant, that Israel will not be destroyed. It is an unconditional covenant with all mankind. And Yehovah in Isaiah 54 is saying that Israel is still under the Noahide covenant. And this is the summation of that. This is an important point in debunking the Talmudist B'nai Noahide lie. The Noahide covenant was both universal for all nations and unconditional. It is not connected to man's obedience. So now we get back to the Sabbath, our story in Exodus 16. Were the foreigners gathering manna on the Sabbath, as my Talmudist debater said? The Talmudist I recently had a debate with told me that even in the wilderness, the foreigners did not keep the Sabbath. His evidence was the absence of evidence that doesn't explicitly tell us the foreigners were keeping the Sabbath, and the exception of it in Exodus 12. The exception, as we already seen, was only in regards to the Pesach, and to them not being yet physically circumcised. And this applies to Israel and foreigners. They all must be circumcised to partake in Pesach. And these foreigners were with them the entire time. That's why we see one command portions repeated in Leviticus and Numbers. And none of these times does it tell us the foreigners cannot participate in the rest of commands given to Israel, including the weekly Sabbath. Now let's look at Exodus again, 16:22. Now it happened on the sixth day, they gathered twice as much bread, 2 omers for each one. Then all the leaders of the congregation came and told Moshe, and he said to them, "This is what Yahweh has spoken. Tomorrow is a Sabbath observance, a holy Sabbath to Yahweh. Make what you will bake and boil what you boil, and that all that is excess put aside to be kept until morning." So they put aside till morning, as Moshe had commanded, and it did not become foul, nor was there any worm in it. And Moshe said, "Eat it today, for today is a Sabbath to Yahweh. Today you will not find it in the field. 6 days you shall gather it, but on the seventh day, the Sabbath, there will be none." Before the Sabbath was given at Sinai as a command, it was put into practice in Exodus 16. That for 6 days the assembly of Israel had, which included the foreigners, would go out and gather manna. Then on the sixth day they would gather a double portion, and this included the foreigners. It had to, otherwise, in Exodus 16:27, now it happened on the seventh day that some of the people, and this is interesting, it doesn't say the sons of Israel, it says some of the people. Some of the people went out to gather, but they found none. Now, the Talmudist I was debating says that the foreigner was able to find manna on the seventh day. How? Doesn't say that. So they're just adding to the text to keep you from obeying the Father. Some of them would have found manna on the seventh day that was meant for the foreigners. There was no manna available on the seventh day for Israel or for the foreigners. There was no manna on the ground on the seventh day. They found none. And notice as well, Yahweh intentionally uses the phrase, some of the people, not saying the sons of Israel. So, what's the most ignored passage? This one, right here, Isaiah 56. And thus says Yahweh, keep justice and do righteousness, for my salvation is about to come and my righteousness to be revealed. How blessed is the man who does this, and the Son of Man who takes hold of it, who keeps from profaning the Sabbath, and keeps his hand from doing any evil. And let not the foreigner who has joined himself to Yahweh say, Yahweh will surely separate me from his people. And this is what you see from Rome, as well as the Talmudist, that there's a wall of separation between the Jew and the Gentile. Can you not read the prophecy of Isaiah here? No separation. And if you do that, you are sinning. You are committing lahan. What is that? Lashon hara. Yeah. Where you're speaking lies about a Gentile because they're reading the prophets and saying what the prophets in the Torah say. That doesn't agree with the sages. Let not the foreigner who joined himself to Yahweh say, Yahweh will surely separate me from his people. Nor let the eunuch say, behold, I am a dry tree. For thus says Yahweh to the eunuchs who keep my Shabbat, and chooses what pleases me. Behold, fast my covenant. To them I will give in my house and with my walls a memorial, a name better than the sons and the daughters. Isn't that interesting? And so these foreigners, the eunuchs, because they keep the Sabbath, will have a name better than the sons and daughters of Israel. I will give them an everlasting name which will not be cut off, and also the foreigners who join themselves to Yahweh, to minister to him, and to love the name of Yahweh, not Hashem. This is another thing I'm going to get into in future parts. It's not Hashem. That's not what the third commandment is telling you, to fear saying the name of Yahweh. No. To be his slaves, everyone who keeps from profaning the Sabbath, and takes hold of my covenant, even those who I will bring to my holy mountain and make them glad in my house of prayer. Their burnt offerings and their sacrifices will be acceptable on my altar. For my house will be called a house of prayer for all the peoples. What is that? All the people will keep the Torah? Yahweh's not racist. It becomes obvious to me what the Yehudim are doing. They are jealous that a people that are not his people are hearing the voice of Yahweh, turning from their pagan idolatry into the simplicity of the Kitab Sefer Torah. They are turning from the doctrines and commandments of men, Isaiah 29:13. They recognize that from all sides that the instruction of Yahweh are not with these men, even though they claim it is, Jeremiah 8:8, who command them to do things that are not in the Kitab Sefer Torah. And the Talmudic excuse for this is the foreigner as a convert in Isaiah 56. This is not possible, as Isaiah draws a comparison to the eunuch. If the eunuch was an Israelite, he wouldn't have a chance to be rejoined to Israel. He would be cut off. That's the commandment in Deuteronomy 23:1. This eunuch has to be someone who did not know Yahweh and did not know Torah. And then they learn Torah. Their heart is convicted, like, I have been against the Creator. And then they turn to do what the Creator says, hoping for his mercy on him for acting out in a way against the Torah. This is why it says that he will no longer say he is a dry tree, because Jehovah is going to restore him to be fruitful again. This is not an Israelite. This is someone who did not know the Torah. They did not know right from wrong and good from evil. And this is what Deuteronomy 23:1 says. If this person was an Israelite, they would have known the Torah because it would have been read to them. Right? They would have known this. No one who is emasculated or his male organ cut off shall enter the assembly of Yahweh. So this is what the eunuchs did. They cut off their male member, their male organ, to glorify the man-made king. Because the king told them, you must cut it off for my kingdom. So they did it. But Yahweh has mercy on them and says, you know what? If you learn my ways, even though you have forsaken your body that I gave you, I will restore you. Both groups of men are outsiders, did not know Torah. And that is why by guarding the Torah, they will have a better name than the sons and daughters of Israel. Hallelujah. I mean, this is so simple. And I can't wait to get into the other parts of this to show you just how corrupt the Talmudist has perverted the simplicity of Torah. Absolutely, Charles. That's all I have. Thank you, Sammy and Charles, for being my only true friends here.